And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Michael Gallagher, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers.
How's it going there? My name is Mike Gallagher. I am the author of the novel Body and Blood and a contributing writer for this excellent anthology titled Shoot the Devil.
That is a very evocative name. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them, and as usual, since if you had been following, we aired his interview Body and Blood on Halloween, so you should check that episode out if you haven't. But he was one of the many guests that Declan sent our way when we had a bunch of cancellations at the same time. And so if you don't enjoy this interview, blame Declan. If you do, blame him too. It works. All right, but since you were on here already, we get to change it up. So the religion question: The Last Starfighter, Tron, or RoboCop?
RoboCop.
Okay, why?
Mm-hmm. It's just I just like my stuff a little bit closer to the near future. The grittier and the kind of more grounded, that's kind of my cup of tea. So Tron's great with the light cycles. I love a light cycle as much as the next geek. But RoboCop's my jam.
Okay, and because we're polytheistic, Willow, Legend, or Conan the Barbarian?
I personally have got to go with Willow. Legend was good, but I thought young Tom Cruise was a little bland. And personally, Conan never quite resonated with me, so my vote goes for Willow. Might be a little controversial, but that's my pick.
There was just a debate in our comment section over on Facebook about the values of Willow and 80s sci-fi or fantasy, in general. So I'm Team Willow. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it could have been more. I thought they could have done more with the property going forward. But for what it was, I thought it was most enjoyable.
Absolutely.
All right. And last one, because of the anthology's theme, Dracula, Nightmare on Elm Street, or Halloween?
Nightmare on Elm Street was the only one of those three that genuinely traumatized me for years. So as much as I love Dracula as a literary work, it's got to go to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Okay. All right, and outstanding. And next part is if you're watching this, you can see the anthology cover, but if not, you judging by the title. Today we're going to do a brief interview where we dive into the world of anthologies and short stories. So this time we have Shoot the Devil: 10 Tales of Humans Defeating the Demonic anthology. So let me read the blurb. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, so please forgive me. But 10 of Superversive's finest team up to bring you tales from a serial killer's basement to the Weird West to the average small town, all featuring mostly ordinary men and women fighting back against the forces of darkness. All right, so with that out of the way, fighting the forces of darkness, Michael, can you tell us what your story is titled?
My story is titled Last Chance Lane, and it's about a group of friends who decide to one year at Halloween, venture into the local haunted house, which belongs. It was the home office, the residential office of a very controversial doctor who had a habit of losing patients, and then just one day just seemed to disappear out of nowhere, and his house just sort of sat empty everywhere, and just kind of blighted the block, and just became shrouded with this evil allure around it year after year. So one year they decide that they're done trick-or-treating. They're gonna take the dare that nobody ever has the stones to do. They're gonna go into that house, and it goes very badly for them. So much so that in the wake of it, a couple of them decide to devote their lives to pairing up with a local priest who is a police chaplain and fighting demons around their hometown.
Interesting. So is this part of a larger universe?
No, but it very easily could be.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for this story?
This was I'm a sucker for the haunted house trope. I love haunted houses. I love um, Evil Benign. I think I mentioned that in my last appearance. I'm a huge fan of Evil Benign, things that just look on the surface like they're normal, but they have this terrible aura of dread about them. So I think last year I actually had this story sitting on the shelf. I just wanted to do like a Halloween story about a haunted house of some sort, and I just mentally started building this house and why is it haunted and what's the terrible history behind it, and just kind of from that gradually spiraled out this fully fleshed story.
Okay. So does your story, for people that haven't read this anthology yet, does your story tie into any of the other stories in the collection? Sometimes authors do that.
Yeah, no, these are all a bunch of disparate themes and places. Like they're each one I think is a standalone work on its own, so it doesn't tie into anything.
Okay. So what subgenre would your obviously the collection is a very horror themed
Mhm.
urban fantasy, but your specific story, which subgenres do you think it hits the best?
This is kind of action horror. Think like in the vein of Evil Dead for tone. You know, um, they eventually face off against some things that are definitely not human, and they bring some blessed firepower to help them in their quest. Uh, it's very kind of there's a lot of gunplay and there's a lot of action, um, but it's also I'm a big fan of body horror, so it's kind of got some of that grotesqueness in it too. Uh, it's a higher octane story.
Okay. Um, so the what is it about that action horror and the body horror that appeals to you as an author and as a
Um,
reader? So I'm assuming there
um,
might be some difference.
well, the action horror, I tend to enjoy the faster paced stuff generally. Uh, you know, um, uh, the the stories in the book really run the gamut. John C. Wright's, which a lot of people have been praising, is a masterwork in a slow building, tense kind of a story. Um, but for me, if that goes on for too long, I kind of get bored. So I like to keep things clipping along. And body horror, I think one of the things that really evokes truly horror, like that kind of feeling of revulsion, is setting your eyes on something that looks almost human but is just horribly distorted. So things like The Fly, in a lot of ways, Nightmare on Elm Street, as you mentioned, have those things that really just have a tendency to bend your mind, and I think that's kind of it's got kind of the sick allure to it. Yeah.
Okay. And so, because we promised you a short interview, dear listener, if you could live in the world you created in this universe, that is the Last Chance Lane, would you live there in this world?
Yes, I would. It's actually it's set in a town called Evans Point. It's actually a rather nice town, except for all these horrific beings that are hiding just beyond the veil of reality. But they've also got folks in the town that are more than ready to combat it. So I think I would take my chances here.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Most people would say no to horror, but I mean, you can be brave. Although, I could go anywhere if I had enough plot armor.
Yeah, right.
So, all right. So we promise you short, dear listener. So Michael Gallagher, and I'm saying your name so they can remember to write this down and look you up. But if they're too lazy to check the show notes, can you tell them how they can find you on the wild, wild interwebs?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Missing Byline. You can also go to, if you want to reach out to us, if you go to shootthedevil.wordpress.com, there's a contact page there. You can reach out to us if you want to know anything about the writers or the book itself. And you can also go to my publisher's website where there's also a contact form. sevensorrowsbooks.wordpress.com as well.
Outstanding. And you won't be sorry you did.
That's
All
right.
right. You can find us, dear listener, on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email the show at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, where all the shenanigans happen, at facebook.com/groups/a Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, /groups/a Blasters and Blades podcast. You can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters-and-blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters-tech-and-tech-blades, where you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month, or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts Doc Cisca and Nick Garber duly caffeinated. They will drink until their liver explodes, or wherever else caffeine goes in your body. Maybe the heart. I don't know. I wasn't a biologist. But anyway, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.